We all love fresh fruits and vegetables, but don't you hate it when you reach for a peach only to find that it's gone bad? Here's Hyla with some great tips on how to store your fruits and vegetables. This video is jam-packed with great information.
Hey, I'm Hyla from Hyla Cooking, and today on Home and Garden for Mere Mortals, I'm going to share with you some ways to keep your produce fresh for as long as possible. Two things you have to keep in mind for keeping your produce from going bad is ethylene gas and moisture or wetness. Now, you've probably heard of ethylene because it's commonly talked about when people give you ideas for how to make apples or bananas or avocados ripen faster. So ethylene gas is produced by most fruits. I think it's pretty much only fruits except for potatoes also release it. It's a naturally occurring sort of plant hormone that encourages ripening, but if it goes too far, you can also sort of think of it as like the aging hormone of fruits and vegetables. And while vegetables don't necessarily release ethylene gas themselves, they are still susceptible to its effects. And the good effects of ethylene gas include getting sweeter and getting softer if you're talking about fruits and things like that. The bad effects are getting even softer, like when greens turn sort of yellow, things start to get sort of flaccid. Oh, that's a gross word. We want to keep our fruits and vegetables nice and turgid, which is the opposite of flaccid. So you can use ethylene gas to your advantage if you need to ripen up some nectarines, for example. I could put these in a little paper bag, and the bag holds the ethylene gas in so that it can have its ripening effects. Just make sure to check on it once a day to make sure they're not getting too soft and too ripe. But if you want to prolong the life of your vegetables and your fruits and your produce, then you sort of want to minimize that ethylene gas. So that's why we recommend to store your fruits and vegetables separately. I would never suggest that you store apples in a bag with your lettuce or anything like that. The other thing that encourages produce to sort of start decay and like break down faster is wetness. Now, humidity is good. You want humidity, but you don't want your vegetables to just be sitting in water. So here's a few tips for things you can do once you get home from the store or you bring your cut vegetables in from your garden. I find that leafy greens are often the most susceptible to sort of like wet decay, and I think that's partly because of their delicate nature, and also a lot of times, you know, when you go to the store and they spray them with water constantly to keep them from drying out, but then you end up with there's probably a tablespoon of water in this bag. So at the very least, I would say when you come home with your groceries, just take them out of the bag, dump that water out in the sink, and then rebag it. If you have an extra few minutes, this is what I do when I get home from the store. So I'll use kale as my example. And then this is an example of the little yellowing. There's obviously a little bit of a damaged spot, which is causing that yellowing. But I'm sure you've all seen it when you like forget that you bought a bunch of kale or a bunch of chard and you leave it in the fridge for a week and then you pull it out and the leaves have completely turned yellow. That's the ethylene gas, which sort of causes the chlorophyll to break down. And the chlorophyll is what makes them green. So what I do is pull the stems off, just like the big part of the stem. My dog actually really likes to eat kale stems, so I give them to him as a special treat. And you can totally eat kale stems too, but I just kind of like to break off the woodiest part of it. Give them a quick little rinse in the sink. And then a couple of options. I've got just a little plastic container here that I'm gonna line it with a clean little napkin, and this is going to absorb the extra moisture and the water so that the leaves aren't just sitting in water the whole week. And then I can kind of tear it up into little chunks, and you can pack it as full as you like, and then put the lid on it, and then you have some washed and torn kale that is ready to saute or use however you want throughout the week. So I also like really doing this because it helps me actually eat my vegetables because they're prepped already, basically. If you don't have a plastic container, that's fine. You can also just put the leaves back in the grocery store plastic bag, again with like a nice tea towel or something like that. It doesn't have to be particularly nice, but it should be clean. Another tip for fresh herbs to keep them fresh, and this actually works really well for asparagus too. So this is a bunch of parsley, and I've just got it in a little bit of water. You basically want to treat your cut herbs like you would cut flowers. So put a couple inches of water in a jar or a glass, and then I just like to cover it back with the bag to keep that humidity in there. This works really well with cilantro and parsley, flat leaf or curly parsley. Either one of those you can store at room temperature or in the fridge. More sort of almost tropical herbs like basil, you could do the same thing but store it on the counter and it'll stay fresh and green for a week or so. Other vegetables that benefit from storing them in a bag with a paper towel or a dish towel are really thin-skinned squashes, like your pickling cucumbers, your English hothouse cucumbers, zucchini, yellow squash, things like that, and mushrooms. A lot of times mushrooms you'll buy and they're covered in a little plastic thing, but definitely take them out of that and put them into a paper bag, or at least into a plastic bag with some paper towel in there. Fruits and vegetables that are best to store on the counter and not in the fridge include your stone fruits like peaches and nectarines, your tomatoes, potatoes, onions. Potatoes and onions are great to store if you have like a nice dark cool cabinet. Put them in there away from the light. That's what makes potatoes turn green sometimes. So avoid putting them out in the sun or out on your counter. But you don't want to store your potatoes and onions very close to each other because potatoes release ethylene and onions are sensitive to ethylene. I actually store my onions in the fridge a lot of times, and I know that you're not supposed to do that, but I've never had anything bad come of it, and I find that I cry less, that having chopping up a cold onion is less likely to make my eyes tear up. So I don't know, you try it and you let me know if you think it works. I think it works. I hope these tips have been useful and that you can apply them in your own kitchen and eat more fresh vegetables. And if I left out anything, if you have any questions or anything you'd like to add, please leave a comment below. I'd love to hear about it. Check out my channel, Hilah Cooking, for over 400 video recipes, and remember to subscribe to Home & Garden for Mere Mortals for more videos. Bye! Hey, I'm Hilah from Hilah Cooking, and I'm going to show you my 3 best tips for how to pick a watermelon. Now when you're at the store,